In terms of permanent, and also in terms of visas, one thing that I will also give the agency some credit, time frames. They used to be somewhat difficult. In some cases now you can be looking at as little as a few weeks for a person to obtain the visa if they need to, a couple of weeks here, maybe a week of processing at a consulate overseas, and then that individual can come in. But of course it varies by country and it varies by situation, and some folks find themselves in being locked out for 5-6 months, and that can be a real difficult way to run a business. I've read recently of an individual who was trying to run his business from his friend's couch in Canada via Skype. Maybe not the most effective. I'm no management guru, but I can imagine that's probably not the best way to run your business. For permanent residents, there are also options, but again, they're very heavily weighted toward employer-employee relationships. This is where we really see some significant backlogs. If you're lucky, you're from the right country, and you do the right job, and the right scenario falls, you may wait 6 to 12 months to get a permanent resident card or a green card. If you are not in one of those circumstances, you may be waiting 6 or 7 years if you're lucky. So that's certainly no way to do it. And these are often for jobs where the employer has already shown there's not a qualified or willing U.S. worker to take the position. So it's not that it's a question of waiting for a need to arise. The need is here. When can we get the person in to fill it? So, I think in terms of the notion, what I would tell folks who are going through this process, and what I really try to counsel my employers, is talk about job creation. Talk about the broader impact of your non-citizen on the economy. It's a great way to really sort of bring it back and focus it on the bigger picture, because immigration regulations have a fair amount of minutia, and they're somewhat complicated. And if you can really try to focus people back on the big picture when you're going through this process, I think it really helps. In terms of sourcing and retaining talent, first of all, Jason mentioned student visas, and a lot of folks who come over here and graduate from a program are going to be eligible to work for a little while in the United States, for typically a year, and in some cases up to 27 months. It's a great program. It's a great way to get those individuals, and for employers to sort of figure out if the right individual can come in. It's also not the kind of thing that you need an immigration lawyer for. It's not expensive or complicated to do this. When people call me for this, I say, go see your foreign student advisor. You don't need me. Don't waste your time or your money when you can get it done so much more quickly. It's a great way to sort of get those folks in. In terms of hiring, have an immigration plan. Have a policy that you put forth for the type of people you're hiring. Just like you've got a health insurance plan, hopefully, and a 401k plan, and all of these things, have an immigration policy in place. Because what I found with my clients who are happy, of the foreign nationals, know what they're getting into. The employer has sort of told them what they're getting into. They've demonstrated an understanding of the issues that surround those folks, which in many cases is, I really want to stay in the United States. And so if you can demonstrate some of that understanding through a policy or a plan, that's fantastic. And I would also say, take advantage of your lawyer, and while that may sound self-serving, I mean it in the worst possible way. Take advantage of your lawyer. A lot of immigration attorneys work on flat fees, which means they're not set up to necessarily bill you for a phone call here or there. Call them, ask them for some advice, ask them for what they've seen some of their other clients do, and what's been successful for them. I've seen companies that have continually almost sort of gone back to the well with the same type of graduate programs and the same type of graduate students, and they get a good reputation in there. They become a place that the foreign national wants to work, and they know they'll be treated fairly when they get there, and it's a nice, it turns out to be a really nice win-win for both the foreign national and the employer. And I would also say, mention, ask your talented people. I mean, and what I tend to see, especially with my clients, is that in many cases they're very interconnected and very well connected to each other. They talk. There are a lot of sort of what I might refer to as a secondary website where people are, it's almost a clearinghouse of immigration information where people are talking about, when did yours get filed, when did mine get filed, how long is it taking, what are the circumstances and scenarios. So people are plugged into that community pretty well, and I think Jason, the concept you mentioned of bringing people in and bringing them together where they feel like they have a community, certainly a great option in terms of making people feel welcome and comfortable in employment here in Boulder. And you know, as I'll mention finally, because I do it just about every time I talk, do let your representatives and your folks in Congress know how important it is.
Not me. He means other ones. If you look at the districts, I know it's already.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because Representative Polis has been a great advocate for this cause ever since he came in. But you know, as he mentioned, there are some folks that may be tied into some different views, and the anti-immigration groups out there are fairly well organized, and they will flood people's offices with anytime anything comes up. So if you think it's a good thing that somebody is allowed to stay here and create jobs, go ahead and let your congressperson know.
One more thing I want to mention legislatively before we open it up is obviously representing the district that has the University of Colorado Boulder, and I think Jason alluded to this too, how frustrating it is when we're graduating top flight, you know, engineers, scientists, people who are on vacations on student visas, which are relatively easy to get, and they're unable to deploy their talents here, even though many of them, and some of them want to return home, that's fine, but many of them want to work here, deploy their talents here, become American. There's really no route to do that. So one of the bills that I'm a co-sponsor, we call it the Staples Act. It means with every degree in a technical field that you get, a bachelor's degree from a university or a master's degree, you basically get a green card staple to that and be allowed to deploy your talents here, again, rather than export that human capital to the rest of the world, subsidizing their development. So if you look at some of the engineering fields, physics, and grad students at CU, there's a lot of foreign nationals. Some of these departments are like as much as 1/3 foreign nationals. And again, many of them are not allowed to deploy their talents here. And then we wonder why the jobs follow them back to India or wherever else they're coming from, or China. It's because there is no route for them to deploy their talents here that they gained at our university.
Great, thank you so much. You all missed one other avenue, which is to find a nice girl or boy and get married.
Well, and as you know, actually, it only works for straight people, too.
Okay, which only works for straight people, and that actually is a really good point.
You know, actually, that doesn't work. We actually have 2 companies where U.S. citizen with foreign-born wife, not from Canada, so one in Mexico and one in Brazil, and they're living here with their wives. They say it'll be 6 to 9 month wait. So it's not that easy. All kidding aside, yeah, so there's 2 problems.
Well, I was successful in keeping my German husband here, who's in the audience today.
Thank you.
For which Jed thanks me.
I didn't know you were married to her. I thought I'd met your wife. I'm really confused right now.
So Jed has hired the high-tech talent, which is my husband, who was able to stay in this country. Well, he probably would have gotten another H-1B visa, but I married him instead.